Hey, this is StarCraft 2 History, and this one I'm going to talk about Stephano. And I've talked about him a little bit, mostly in the Broodlord Infestor era, but I'll talk about him more in depth here. So Stephano was, in my opinion, the greatest foreigner player, and at least he has the best case for it, in my opinion. It really depends on how much you take away from the Broodlord Infestor era or not. But and how much I guess you weight wins, because this guy had a lot of fucking wins against pretty strong opponents throughout his career, and a lot of them are very memorable. So that might actually be why he's so fondly remembered. And Stephano was a player that had some contradictions in him. So, for instance, in the first time I saw him, it was like Home Story Cup, basically. Was it Home Story Cup? It was pretty fucking early on. But basically, there's this... The casters are basically saying, and I don't know if this is true because I can't confirm it, but basically they're saying Stephano was a guy who had grinded a lot in StarCraft 2, was playing a shitload of StarCraft 2 at the time. And this was before he really raised up his level at the end of 2011 and then really let off the gas, so to speak, or at least, as far as we know, publicly tried to push that persona out. And so when you get into 2011, at the end of 2011, that's when he really starts rising up. And by that point, whatever version of super hard grinding Stephano, that rep basically dies out. And what we get instead is this guy who has ascended to a Zen-like state and has enjoyed his life, basically. So what I mean by that is, in terms of StarCraft 2, this is a person who could really break down the builds, really break down the refinements, and this is why he created the 200 Roach Max as we knew it back then. This is also why he was basically the first one to really popularize and understand the 3-hatch build with using queens as your primary unit for defense, because by then you had 5-range queens, which could basically defend anything the Terran or Protoss could throw at you early on. And what I mean by defend everything is, if they actually attacked, you could figure out, you could reactively deal with it, basically. Especially if you were scouting. And his first big tournament comes at IPL 3. That's the one where he wins against Lucky. That's the famous Kiwi Cocky game before everybody learned to hate Broodlord Infestor. Then there's ESWC. I'd say one of his two biggest victories actually comes in 2012, run from NESL Season 3, where he beats, was it Hero in the finals? It might have been somebody else. Maybe it was Alicia. Pretty sure it was a Kong. Yeah, it was Alicia. Right, so he has a very good run here. Basically beats Hero, MC, and Alicia, all pretty strong PvZ, Protoss players, basically. I don't think Alicia was that great at PvZ, but Hero and MC definitely were. WCS EU, he wins it over Vortex and Lucifron. And then you go into Heart of the Swarm, and he basically gets second place to MVP in Season 1 WCS EU, and still a pretty good player by then. But his motivation kind of basically bottoms out, and he's never really quite the same player as he was back then. And it's hard to say exactly what it was that changed. I've looked at a bunch of his games, and it feels like, if I had to say, it's basically his focus is way worse than it was before. And what I mean by focus is, I'm not sure how much his game sense comes from practice and how much it came from the understanding of the game. But before the latter half of 2013, which is basically his fall off and his drop, and basically he doesn't ever rise up again from that moment. Before all that, Stephano was, in many ways, one of the most intelligent players in the world. He could break down Zerg builds, he could find his own little adjustments to them, his own little refinements to them that really changed the way the entire map could play out. And he was also a player who used those adjustments to make up for the fact that he wasn't necessarily a godlike micro player. He was very good with spellcasters, I'll give him that, but in terms of godlike micro Zerg players, he wasn't like Life, he wasn't like Jadong, or he wasn't like Effort, I guess, if you're talking about just Zerg thing Baneling or something. But he was a much smarter player, and this really helps when you're playing Zerg. I think Zerg is the best at using those small little details, right? Or can be, especially when you're talking about like a giant macro game. And in terms of his mindset, I think he had the best winner's mentality, or not. No, I don't think it was the winner's mentality. It was he had the best mindset to win, and that's a very strange distinction. Because for me personally, I think winner's mentality is that relentlessness to always practice, to always get back from your losses, to learn from your losses, to get better next time. Stephano didn't have that. What Stephano had though was a mentality that always let him win, or gave him the best chance to win, because he was so laissez-faire about his wins and losses that it didn't affect him nearly as much as it did other players. And there was some interview, I can't find it anymore, but basically he said he used to get very angry on the ladder. And then when he realized that the anger was holding him back, he completely let it go. And that's basically when he transformed into a much better player. And this mentality has basically stuck with him for the entire rest of time, as far as I can tell, where like it doesn't matter what kind of weird shit is going on in outside of the game. Like he could be partying till like 3 a.m. He could be like taken out by like the police, like that famous escort from DreamHack picture. He could lose his keyboard, he could lose his mouse, he could lose his luggage. It never mattered. None of that shit ever affected Stephano. When he got that guy into the game, he fucking played. And he played like a god sometimes. And I think, actually, I didn't go over this, but basically, probably his most famous feat might be the GSL versus World show match, where he almost like reverse all kills the entire Korean team only to be stopped by Life. And it's like an incredible, was it Life or was it Squirtle? I think it might have been Squirtle that stopped him. But in any case, it was like another incredible thing about Stephano was he could always like pull it out, even like at times when like he really didn't expect it to pull out, and that's why he's always considered like so magical. And that's probably why he's so loved, and he gets away with like a lot more shit compared to other other popular StarCraft 2 players. It's like I'm not exactly sure how to explain it, but basically he was the guy people thought they wanted to be, because he was like living the rock star life. He was winning tournaments. He was an incredible player that could play against the Koreans. And he was incredibly smart with his in-game decision making, and he had a lot of exciting games, especially against Polt. So that's basically what Stephano was to me. And if you can find it, I think there's a great article about Stephano. The best ever written was probably by Thorin, about what kind of person Stephano was. So if you could try to find that, that's a really good article to read. And I think that about covers it for StarCraft 2 history. Stephano, one of the greatest of all time. In my opinion, the best winner the foreigner scene has ever seen. And definitely like one of the highest cases of the best foreigner ever. Like the only other person that can challenge him for that is Naniwa. And that should do it. See you guys next time.